Welcome to the discussion. Today my guests are Ben Cotton, the President, CEO, and Founder of SciTech Services, Mark Orlando, the Chief Technology Officer for Cyber Protection Solutions at Raytheon, Dylan Owen, a Senior Manager for Cyber Services at Raytheon, and Dr. Shujane Thompson, a Vice President Partner with Cyber and Biometrics Practice at IBM. Welcome to the discussion today. Let me set a little context for our conversation. It's been almost 3 years since the White House issued Presidential Policy Directive 41 and its corresponding Cyber Incident Response Plan. If you remember, PPD 41 outlined some key concepts around defining what a cyber incident is and even what a major cyber incident meant. It also provided guiding principles for incident response. From that PPD, the Homeland Security Department developed a National Cyber Incident Response Plan, providing even more details about the activities and the lead federal agencies for each of those activities. But what PPD 41 and the NCIR are reactive documents and plans coming after someone or an organization has been victimized by a cyber attack. What is missing is how agencies can get ahead of the attack through proactive threat hunting and a more strategic response. Over the last few years, with the evolution of cyber tools and capabilities, most notably the sharing of threat intelligence, that has enabled agencies to do more to get ahead of the cyber threats. In fact, in the 2018 National Cybersecurity Strategy, the White House specifically calls out the use of cyber threat hunting capabilities, saying the government, quote, will be able to assess the security of its data by reviewing contractor risk management practices and adequately testing, hunting, censoring, and responding to incidents on contractor systems. Contracts with federal departments and agencies will be drafted to authorize such activities for the purpose of improving cybersecurity. There are several benefits from this proactive stance agencies are taking to address cyber threats, including reducing damage to the organization, improving the speed of response. So what should agencies know about moving toward this proactive model? Well, again, that's where my guests come in. Dylan, let me start with you just to get some basics for our discussion. When we talk about incident and threat hunting, that has really evolved over the last decade, but let's give a basic definition of what we're talking about here.
Yeah, sure. So, to kind of start off, what it is not is just responding to an alert that your system is already tuned to, right? So threat hunting is looking for suspicious or malicious activity in your network that your current tools don't currently detect. So it could be, you've read a blog and there's a piece of intelligence around a piece of malware or an actor technique or procedure, and you go looking for that on your network because your IDS, your antivirus, or your SIEM may not already be able to detect that. And so that's kind of the basic definition of threat hunting.
It feels like when we talk about threat hunting, you're trying to discover something that you haven't discovered before. So if you're reading about something, is it the fact that these antivirus or tools, these intrusion detection prevention tools just haven't been updated yet? Like I guess help me kind of parse that a little bit.
Yeah, that's part of it. But there's so many people out there doing research, and you can never know, and these companies can never know about all of the threats. So just because somebody else may have discovered something, number one, it doesn't mean that your tool vendors know about it, and number two, that doesn't mean that that activity doesn't exist on your network, and you just aren't aware of it. So you weren't aware of that technique. So now that you are, you can go and look for it on your network and see if you can find it.
Let me bring in some of the other panelists for this, because the other piece of this is the idea of cyber threat intelligence and the importance that has been over the last, if you will, 3, 5, 7 years. We see the development of not only the intelligence community, but the CTIC, the Cyber Intelligence Threat Sharing Center, and then DHS has also provided a lot of the cyber intelligence. Where does that fit in? I'll just open up to the panel. The cyber intelligence, is that why threat hunting is, if you will, has evolved?
I would say cyber threat intelligence is a key ingredient for hunting. It's not the only part of it, but I think we've seen cyber threat intelligence, and particularly intelligence sharing, which you mentioned, has come a really long way in the last couple of years, particularly with efforts spearheaded by DHS and other agencies. We've seen a lot more intel sharing going on. We've seen a lot more formality and process wrapped around gathering intelligence, sharing it with the community, making sure it gets into the hands of defenders to do things like proactive threat hunting. Really, that's just us trying to be smarter about what it is we're looking for and understanding what our adversaries' capabilities are. And then that gives us a better idea of what we're looking for when we go out and try to hunt for those threats.
If I may add to that, I think threat intelligence is a form of from data to information to insight. And then from the insight, then we derive the intelligence, and hopefully that intelligence can help us to, launch actions against the bad actors. And as of today, our infosphere really had no boundaries. And so for us to be able to game the intelligence, it really required that sharing of intelligence. And this is why, as an example, in IBM, we have the X-Force threat database, 6 to 7 terabytes of threat data, helping hunters like you and I to be able to game the basic intelligence so we can then build from that foundation to be able to get to the bad actors sooner and faster and in a more smart way, if you would.
So maybe let me bring Ben into this conversation as well. When you look at what factors make good threat hunting and then turn that into an incident response, what are some of those things that people should consider as they're developing these teams? A lot of security operations centers across government are really starting to look at this.
Absolutely, and so the principle that we like to follow is forensics first. So that is closely coupled with your ability to see more is to know more, right? So if you take the threat intel data and then you apply it to a forensics process that has visibility on every single aspect of what's going on an endpoint, then you're able to ascertain if those threats do exist inside of your environment. And the trick to that is to do that in a timely fashion so that you're looking simultaneously across all of your endpoints and you're not focused in a narrow lane to where you miss those threats that exist on other endpoints or other aspects of your network.
I'd like to add to that.
Dylan.
And I think Ben's key point here is visibility. If you can't see things on your network, whether it's at the endpoint or at that network level, you'll never find those threats. So, if there's a threat that takes advantage of web traffic and you're not collecting your web proxy logs, you'll never detect it. So, and that's one of the big things we find not only at government agencies but commercial customers is just where they focus on their visibility and making sure they get the right level so that you can go and be an effective threat hunter on a network.
And so much of what the government's been doing over the last 5, 6, 7 years is really focused on this visibility. I mean, we can look back at the Office of Personnel Management breach, and the reason why the breach happened, there's several reasons, but one big one is they didn't have the visibility. We know the continuous diagnostics and mitigation program has also been focused on visibility. Is that really the first step to really being able to be a quality, if you will, threat hunter, is knowing what you have?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a key set of logs and other technologies that you need in order to be able to do this hunting. And if you're not collecting those, you're just blind to it, and it makes it that much harder. It doesn't make it impossible, but it certainly makes it much harder and much longer process to find those things than if you had the right visibility across your network and your endpoints.
If I could add on to that a little bit, it also matters to the quality of data that you're collecting off of those endpoints. So if your technology stack and your security stack is based entirely on API calls into an operating system, then fundamentally your approach is flawed because you'll never see those things that are occurring on that endpoint because of rootkits and other obfuscation type technologies. So you really have to have forensics grade information coming back into your action team so that they can make very sound and accurate decisions based on that data.
And Dr. Thompson, before you jump in, let me just ask Ben to put a little finer point on this. For our audience, when you talk about API calls, I think most of us are familiar with API calls, but you're saying that that's just the tool hitting the network saying, okay, tell us what's happening and pulling data back, and you're saying we need to go the next level deeper? So
more precisely, if let's use Windows for an example. Windows Management Interface, WMI, you can create a process by which you query the WMI function on a system and it will return processes to you, okay? The challenge with that is that you're relying on a potentially compromised operating system to tell you what is truly there, okay? Which, a rootkit will simply do the digital Jedi mind trick and say, this is not the process you're looking for, right? So the ability to have forensics grade drivers and collection off of those endpoints, to Dylan's point, is absolutely critical when you're making hunting and security decisions based on data collection on your endpoints.
And Dr. Thompson, jump in.
Yeah, I think very well said. And imagine today, any other organization out there today are using 5 to 16 cloud environment. and collecting the endpoint data across your enterprise, including your legacy environment. And to be able to make sense of the data, I think one very important principle here is stay away from garbage in, garbage out. And this is why the intelligence filters have ability to aggregate and correlate the information and really employ technology such as AI, machine learning, help you to get to the end game much faster, much more intelligently.
You brought up a lot of keywords there, AI, machine learning, right? And we're going to get to that. Cloud, you brought up. We can't have a conversation without that. But before we go into that, are there certain mistakes you're seeing? Are there certain, as you talk to government clients or private sector clients, are there certain mistakes that you guys see time and again? Mark, you want to jump in on that?
Sure. I think one mistake that we see, and this is certainly specific to incident response and threat hunting, but also it's really across all of network defense, which is over-reliance on technology. So we just talked about things like AI and machine learning, and I think those are very valuable tools. But I think in some cases, when we talk about tools, there's an assumption that if I buy enough technology and I deploy enough tools, that I'm kind of checking the boxes in terms of everything I need to do for network defense. And really what we've seen is there's a lot of waste there, there's a lot of duplicative technologies. It becomes a personnel and training issue where now you need to hire lots of people to operate all of these tools. So I think that's something that we certainly see, and it's not unique to the public sector. It's really across the board.
That's a great point, the duplication. I think I've talked to several vendors over the last couple of years, and they've said many times, well, you buy this tool, then you buy that tool, and then you don't realize that the first tool you bought had the same capabilities as that second tool you bought. So of course I throw it back to them and go, isn't that your fault? And they go, well, yeah, it is actually. So it's actually a very interesting kind of a conversation that way. Are you seeing agencies recognizing that they have these tools in place that they can take more advantage of? Or is that something that, for instance, something Raytheon or IBM or Cytech Services can help them kind of understand, like, you know, you already do those things, but it's over here, you just have to click that box to turn it on?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, I know that's something that we spend quite a lot of time doing, is helping people optimize what they already have and eliminate duplicative tools, duplicative processes, kind of streamline investments that they've already made. And it can be a process. I mean, procurement cycles and licensing cycles, I mean, these are kind of annual, and in some cases they go out multiple years. So to walk back some of those things and to really take a hard look at some of the decisions that have been made, expenditures that have been made, it can be a very time-consuming process. But we do spend a lot of time focusing on getting the right visibility, not overdoing it with tools and technology.
And that's another key thing, besides technology, is data, right? So a lot of customers, or whether it's in the private sector or the public sector, they look at just, well, I'm going to collect all my data, and that's really not the best way to go about it. You need to have a reason for that data. Now, some of it's compliance, and we understand that, but from a threat hunting perspective and an incident response perspective, you should have a use case around the data you're collecting. So if I'm going to collect my web proxy data, what am I going to be specifically looking for? If I'm going to collect, system event data from all of my servers, why am I doing that? So because a lot of these, your SIMs and other things, they're now licensed by the amount of data you bring in. So if you're bringing useless data in, you're just wasting money. So you want that data to all, to have a use case on why do you want it? What is how is it going to be relevant to your threat hunting or your incident response operations? And then, you can prioritize how you bring it in, and then that goes into your procurement cycles and having the right tool and making the best use of the money in those limited funds that you have in your enterprise.
Ben?
In addition to what my partners here have articulated, we're also seeing an over-reliance on castle and moat type thought processes, where if I build a deep enough moat and a high enough castle wall, I'm going to keep people out. And what that results in is an underpreparedness for when things fail, right? And this is part of the hunt discussion as well. But if you don't plan for when those security tools fail, and let's face it, there's a certain level of efficacy across any security stack, and each security stack is unique by that blend of technologies as they've been implemented. But if you don't plan for failure inside of your cyber environment, then once that happens to you, and it will happen, you waste money, you waste time, and that exposes your organization to an exceptional amount of risk in today's legislative environment.
Absolutely. I think also a lot of time people talking about automations when we talk about threat hunting. You know, the automation can misleading the traceability and the forensic of the certain type of threats. I think human intelligence is still really need to be played in the core, and the combination of artificial intelligence with human intelligence, then we can really get to the end game. And I think you were right on. I mean, the truth of the matter here is that you can put in automation, you can really bring in the right data into the mix. The key here is when we are in action to respond to an incident, the people has to come into play, and they have to have the skill sets, experience, and have to have the eyes, and which is really built from their knowledge, if you would, to be able to really triage into the problem domain.
I think you make a great point, because a lot of times there's this hope where we always talk about the silver bullet in cybersecurity, and really there is none. The silver bullet in cybersecurity is the people. It's not the next great technology. In this case, we've talked a lot about AI or machine learning. There's also, I want to go back to something that Dylan talked about, which was the use case. But first, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we have plenty to talk about, technology and people at the very least. You're listening to the panel discussion, Every Side of Cyber, Building a Nation-Scale Quick Reaction Force, sponsored by Raytheon on Federal News Radio, part of the Federal News Network.